Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was an amazing man, as all of us know. And I'd like to give you just a little bit of background on my relationship with Dr. King. In the fall of 1967, I first met Dr. King in person. It was a Sunday evening at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And the occasion was the installation of new members. And I was a new member. I was a 17-year-old freshman at Spelman College in Atlanta. And in fact, Dr. King's sister, older sister, who is still living, by the way, was one of my instructors. So yes, it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. So you can just imagine that I was just amazed. When I looked at him, and we could, see eye to eye, because he was not that tall in stature, but he was an amazing communicator. Earlier that same year, he had his 4th book published. And no one knew at that time that that would be his last book published. The title of that book was, "Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community?" He was a brilliant communicator, both in writing and in his ability to speak. In fact, I would say that it was clearly his communication skills were clearly part of his amazing spiritual gifts that he honed quite well, wouldn't you say? Quite well. And when he said, "Nonviolence means avoiding not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of spirit," that changed the way people thought about nonviolence and violence. It wasn't just physical violence, the refusal or the lack of physical violence that was nonviolence. It is also internal violence of spirit that we must avoid in order to be nonviolent. Now, I will ask you the question. When you say you are nonviolent, do you also include the refusal to hate another person? Do you include the refusal to hate another person as being nonviolent? Well, that is what Dr. King meant. That is what he taught. He taught and he lived according to Jesus' teachings. Love your brother as you would love yourself. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And in his final book, he provided an analysis of where things stood in our country in 1967 in terms of race relations, in terms of economic distribution, education, housing, and certainly voting rights, just to name a few. He began the first chapter of his book by saying that we were at a point of self-examination and self-reflection. My friends, today, I believe we are at a point of self-examination and self-reflection. Yes, we are at the beginning of a new year, which often prompts us to do some self-examination and self-reflection. But I'm talking about more than that. We are at a point in an evolution in our country and in the world. So let's take a breath. Let's just breathe into that. The words of Dr. King, the words that he spoke in 1967 certainly resonated with me very deeply, very profoundly, and arguably every black and brown person and every person who felt unheard, unseen, unwanted, unappreciated. So in this moment and on this day, in his honor, let's take another breath. We must breathe into our knowing of truth. We must breathe into the knowing that even when things appear to be their darkest, we have evidence that we can overcome, right? Yes. We have evidence, historical evidence, that we can overcome when laws prevent people from eating with each other, from going to restaurants, from attending movies with each other, from getting a hotel room, from attending the school of their choice, from living in the neighborhood of their choice, from voting, from marrying the person whom they love. We know these kinds of laws can change. So we take another breath. Yeah. When life, the outer world, seems utterly outer, to paraphrase something that Howard Thurman said, let us remember that we are multidimensional beings and we are one. Let us breathe into our inner sanctuary and realize there is only one presence and one power operating throughout this universe. And we are one with that power. Let's repeat this again as an affirmation for ourselves. There is only one presence and one power operating throughout the universe, and I am one with that power. Yes. Let's say that again with a little oomph. There is only one presence and one power operating throughout this universe. And I am one with this power. Yes, we know this. We are truth students who live this. Yes, yes. when we allow ourselves to pause and acknowledge the workings of Spirit, we are able to have clarity in the midst of chaos. So the question posed by Dr. King in 1967, where do we go from here, chaos or community, is the same question that we are being called to answer today. Today. And so in the midst of what appears to be chaos, like the continuing pandemic, the social and political divisiveness, the economic uncertainties, and the continuing all-out war in many parts of the world, we are being called to stop, to pause, to breathe, and to listen to our divine guidance. I believe the former youth poet laureate Amanda Gorman, brilliant young woman, responded to this question when she performed her amazing poem, "The Hill We Climb," last year at the presidential inauguration. And she said in part, "In this truth, in this faith, we trust." While once we asked, how can we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? Yes. Yes. In the breath, in the holy wisdom of Spirit, we seek and we find the answers. We trust through the power of our faith. We see through the power of our divine imaginations. And then we act. We act. As our fifth unity principle states, knowing and understanding the laws of life, also called truth, are not enough. We must live the truth that we know. But let's be honest with ourselves and each other. It can be easy to fall into a feeling of despair when we witness actions of violence and greed and indifference to our children, to the sufferings of our children, of our elders, and the future of our planet. Which I believe it is why we have the breath. The breath is life. And as long as we have life, we have the capacity to reset. We have the capacity to reset. I love what the 14th century poet Hawkins says in this kind of situation. I'd like to read a poem of his right now. And he says, "I sometimes forget that I was created for joy. My mind is too busy, my heart is too heavy for me to remember that I have been called to dance. The sacred dance of life. I was created to smile, to love, to be lifted up, and to lift others up. O sacred one, untangle my feet from all that ensnares. Free my soul, that we might dance, and that our dancing might be contagious. Yeah. We are here to remind each other that we were created for joy. We were created to love and to uplift. We were created to continue to create a world that works for all, not just some, but for all. We were created to live as one. That was Dr. King's message to us, to our country, to our world. We were created to give birth to a greater reality. We were created to give birth to a greater reality for ourselves and our children. And our children are being created to birth a greater reality for themselves and their children. And this greater reality includes a future for our planet. Because we are tied inextricably to our planet as well as to each other. In his book, Birthing a Greater Reality, my dear teacher and friend, Reverend Robert Brummett, said this: our work is to bring the kingdom of heaven into the busy city, into the marketplace of human desires, and to live in the serenity of oneness amidst the warring factions of the human mind and heart. In this way, we give birth to a greater reality, a reality based on love and unity, rather than fear and separation.